Good morning, boys and girls. This is Miss Ramsey. Today's lesson is for Friday, March 20th, and we are going to continue our lessons on comparing and contrasting. But today we're going to zoom in on plot, and we're going to talk about how the plot of Sootface and the plot of the Rough-Faced Girl help us understand the stories even more. So let's talk about plot. Plot is the sequence of important events. So what happens first, next, then, and last. And in the beginning, we have specific details that we have to know to understand the middle, and those details help us understand the end. So what you're looking at right now, we call this a story arc, and it looks kind of like an upside down U or like an N that has some flattened sides. And this helps us map out our story. So when you were in younger grades, you probably talked about the beginning, the middle, and the end. But as we get older and we learn more about reading and read more complex or difficult books, we learn that there's actually a lot of important details in between the beginning, the middle, and the end. So we're going to talk about the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. And I've put these words beginning, middle, and end there so that you know where these things happen in the story. So let's talk about the exposition. That happens at the beginning of the story, and that is where we learn about the character. Usually the author will give us some information about their past or what happened before the story started. And then we have the rising action. This is the longest portion of the story, boys and girls. This is usually at least, well, it's over half of the story because this is where all of the action happens. And it leads us to our climax. The climax is the point where things get heated. It is the point of conflict. It's the point of the story. The most important information happens at the climax. And then the falling action is what happens as they resolve the climax. And then the resolution is how the story ends. So let's go back to the exposition and look between the exposition and the rising action, because that is what we call the turning point, and that's when the conflict starts. Or if you remember from second grade, when the trouble starts, if you did trouble stories in second grade. So expositions usually, like I said, have some details about the characters and what happened before the story started. So let's look at Sootface and let's sort of map out the story on this arc and talk about what details happened in that story that can help us understand it even more. So in the beginning, we learned before the story started that Sootface's mother had died and that she was being raised by her father, and she had two older sisters who were really unkind to her. So we could call that the exposition. Now the turning point or the conflict is when we learn that she gets this new name. Her sisters call her Sootface because they start using the ashes from the fire to make her look different, and they belittle her, they bully her, they make her feel small. And the majority of the story is the struggles that Sootface experiences, the rising action. And we learn during the rising action about the invisible man and how all of these women want to marry him. But like the sister tells us, the sister of the invisible man, that unless they can describe his bow and see him, then they cannot marry him. So this all happens in the rising action. Now the climax is when Sootface actually sees the man. And the falling action are all of those details in the hut afterwards when Sootface is with the invisible man's sister and he takes that game offering or the animal that he's killed back to Sootface's family. And then the resolution, that's when Sootface's sisters on the very last page, they're having to do all the cooking, and Sootface is on the other side of the struggle or of the climax, and she's happily married to the invisible man. So that shows you how stories go and how the details have an important place in the story. So if you want to try, a challenge for you would be to see if you can do the same arc for the rough-faced girl. And if you can, upload that or email it to your teacher, and that's just a fun little bonus activity that you could do to show us that you understand plot. But we are really focusing on comparing and contrasting. So your task for today is comparing and contrasting the plots of both Soapface and the Rough-Faced Girl. So I went through and already told you the details and the plot of Soapface. So you're going to take a lot of the information I've already told you and put it into your Venn diagram. What you're going to have to decide is what is unique or contrasting to Soapface and the Rough-Faced Girl, and what's the same, what's going to go in the center of your diagram. So write at least 3 sentences explaining how they're alike, and also write 3 sentences on how they are different. These this is our last lesson on comparing and contrasting. And so far we've seen some pretty good work from you guys in this area, but it is one of our more challenging standards. So don't be afraid to refer back to these videos as long as we are doing our distance learning, because this is a good practice for you to do in all books. Comparing and contrasting is a skill that will help you develop better inferencing skills, better comprehension, and ultimately read more challenging stories. So as we go into the weekend, I want to challenge you to continue reading every day for 20 minutes, even on Saturday and Sunday. I know I'm going to be reading a lot this weekend. It's a pretty sunny day here, so hopefully it's sunny where you are, and you might be able to sit on a back porch or by a window, or maybe even in your backyard if that's a safe place for you to be, and read a book and enjoy some fresh air if you can. And I will see you on Monday, or I guess you'll hear me on Monday with a new set of videos on a brand new standard. So take care, and I will see you guys on Monday.